the knife around your neck. It seems like most of your students wear the knife around the neck. Where does that originate from? Is that totally your idea, or is that something that, like a precious possession when you're in the bush, or?
Well, to tell you the truth, any idea that is developed, you know, near me, I've usually stolen it from somewhere else. I never hardly invent anything fresh. I marry ideas sometimes and come up with something in between. But yeah, early in my career, I had a specialized group. They were the nurses that worked for the Health and Welfare, National Health and Welfare Department, and they had a crash where the nurse in that crash was the 4th or 5th nurse to die in air crashes. And you must realize when someone dies, 17 is a rough rule. 17, 20 people suffer. So there were a lot of survival episodes. And that death, I think, in that incident, the Hartwell affair, caused the people to decide that they wanted to give the 4,000 or some nurses and other ancillary people like dentists and doctors and public works people that fly a basic course that would last, I think, 5 days, 4 nights, 5 days. And I happened to get involved in taking care of the people from Alberta, British Columbia, and the territories north of there. So I went, I think, through 600 of these people. And invariably, these nurses that showed up on courses, if they brought a knife, they were wearing it around their neck. And there was also another common thing with scissors. They like to have their scissors and their knives. Many of them, not all of them, but some of them, when they came on a survival course, they figured those tools were handy, and they always wore them around their neck. And what I found is that in asking why, they said, well, Native people don't often have a belt. And they find that the simplest way to carry a knife is to wear it around their neck. I don't know, I haven't followed this up because this information comes from these nurses. And they said that they discovered that that was the most convenient way because you reach for your knife and it's so accessible. And you're also quite aware of what's up there. Trying to reach at your belt to put your knife back in its sheath, taking your knife, using it lots, putting it back. You save a lot of time if you just have it here. And so that became a kind of thing that I preferred to wear it. Next thing you know, people would imitate me and they'd ask me why, and I'd explain, and then that became a popular sort of thing. And I usually joke with people. I say if you see someone wearing a knife around their neck, it's because they're connected with me in some, they either took a course from me or had enough of a connection to wear their knife around my neck like I do. So. But I do make a joke of it more often than saying it's serious.
Now, you never talk very much about your wife.
Well, actually...
Is she supportive of this, or...? Actually,
on advanced, 30-day courses, I say a lot about my wife, mainly because students always wonder what kind of a woman would marry me. The other thing is that I found in the university programs, I often felt that a sideline to the outdoor education we're teaching is dealing a great deal with relationships. So you have a 30-day course and you got 30 students. Invariably there'll be 1, 2, 3 marriages that result. And as a matter of fact, I find that those marriages, I still run into those students that met each other on the university courses and they're still married. Well, the situation is my wife really knows I do a lot of this. I do burn holes in the floor, linoleum, and the carpet, demonstrating bow drills in the house when visitors come. But basically she stayed at home raising the kids and taking care of feeding the livestock. We used to have a dairy cow, a few horses, some cats, and she grew a big garden. And then of course with the kids, they did the cross-country skiing programs, the jackrabbit program. My daughter was the biathlon participant. They were both my son and daughter were kayakers, and my wife got very skilled. And I found that when I came home trying to keep up with them on cross-country skis, I had difficulty because they were actually keeping them quite fit. So basically, if you call it bushcraft, my wife really didn't do very much in that regard. I taught her how to make a cattail doll, and she probably made 1 or 2. And although I've made thousands, she's only made 1 or 2. So that's the way it goes with the marriage. You might say that sometimes marriage partner is the other side of the coin. But the good thing about my wife is that she could tolerate being married to a person that lived sort of hand to mouth and who was a freelance, where sometimes you don't see any income coming in the next month or so, and you're wondering how you're going to get by, that sort of stuff. She persisted and stuck with it, and that sort of thing. But yeah, anytime I have a joke about marriage or whatever, my wife knows that I would tell these jokes, because I always had to be careful, because when we would have the final get together with the students, they all would tell my wife all the things I said about her and everything. And it was always a dangerous thing to say something negative about my wife, because it would get back to her at that because everybody insists you got to bring your wife, and so on.
So just as electronics has improved greatly over the last years with the internet and all that, has bushcraft and survival improved, or has it steadied out, or is there any new writings, books coming out from anybody with any new stuff?
Yeah, well, the electronic, the internet, and all of that sort of stuff I think, has a very significant influence. I guess I was listening to a fellow who was talking about the implications of the internet, and he says if you publish a hardcover book, this is, let's say 50,000 people, manage to lay their hands on a copy of the book, but on the internet at the same time you could have 5 million people become aware of your writing if it's on the internet in the right way. So it opens up, making $1 trying to publish a book was a feasibility if you wrote enough books. And I think today the people who publish hardcover books are a little worried that the generations coming up, they'd rather not be weighed down with books. Every time you move, you got to move apple box full of books is almost difficult to pick up and lift. I would say that when I first started in the 60s, there were the old, like Kephart and Van Beard and Bernard S. Mason. I could list all these people that had published up to perhaps the 60s, and there was hardly a book with the title Survival in it. And then there's a flood of books with the title Survival. Some reasonably defined, some poorly defined. Some books, they call it survival, but it's not even pioneering the way my father had to in order to be able to relate to the forest, you might say. But I don't detect a really great improvement of the knowledge, because basically those people who would have well-developed scholarly skills matched up with manual skills, all that, they're rare, they're few and far between. I always tell people I'm a very rare type of person, that I'm an instructor and I'm a writer at the same time. And I found over my life that I have used instructing as a means to relate to people who test me every turn, question everything I say. So I've got to be able to deal with that graciously, and being tried and tested by students causes you to progress in a kind of a way where the people understand what you're saying and appreciate what you have to say. And that type of person is rare. I mean, how many of us have spent a lifetime instructing and having large numbers of students that either contribute to the advancement of our own knowledge as instructors, or question anything that's not clear or a bit off the mark?